Writing Out Loud, a program designed to explore in-depth interviews with writers to hear that words have voices.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. My very special guest today is super best-selling author James Patterson. Thank you so much for being here, James.
It's Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And
great to be had.
You know, the New York Times has said that you have transformed publishing. That's a pretty broad statement. What does that mean from your perspective?
Well, I don't know if it's in the New York Times. I don't know if I take it all that seriously. I don't think I've transformed publishing. I think that I've done a few things that hadn't been done before. I think that, you know, right now publishing needs to be transformed, not by me, but it just needs to change radically. Because if we wind up without bookstores in this country, I don't know what's going to happen to this country, you know, and that's a little bit of where we're going, because the ebook phenomenon, it's putting small bookstores out of business, and we haven't adapted to it yet. So the publishing business does need to change radically. I'm not going to do it, but I may influence it a tiny bit.
Well, let's ask the flip of that. Has publishing transformed you at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, in the sense that somebody said at one point, you're lucky if you find something in life that you love to do, and then it's a miracle if somebody will pay you to do it. So that's my situation. I love to write. I'd rather do it than almost anything. And I get paid to do it. You know, I don't consider it work. It's a real joy. And so in that sense, publishing has transformed my life in the sense that I don't have to work for a living.
You began your career in advertising.
Yeah, but I've been clean for 20 years.
When you look back at those years, though, can you point to some pivotal moments in your work in that field?
You know, not really. The only thing that, you know, that's influential on me, that influenced me, is I became really aware that there's an audience out there, and that you should be aware of that. And, you know, I write commercial fiction. If you're writing serious fiction, literary fiction, I guess for a lot of people it's important not to think about an audience, and maybe something, you know, more original or you know, comes out of that. But I always like to think that there's an audience out there, and I'm telling stories. And really, when I tell a story, when I write a story, I have the sense that there's one person sitting across from me, and I don't want them to lose attention. I want to hold them until the story's done.
You think that's been the key to your success?
I think that the keys to what I do are, one, storytelling that just keeps moving forward. Michael Connolly, who's a very good suspense writer, said what Jim does is that every single chapter moves the characterization and the plot forward and turns on the movie projector in our heads. And that's certainly something I try to do. I'm very aware that there are a lot of things competing with books right now for our attention, that our attention spans are shrinking, and I really want to hold people to the story. I want them to keep turning the pages.
Not only turning the pages, but going from book to book, because you write in a lot of series.
Yeah, I'm going to book or going from my book to somebody else's book. But I think it is important that people keep reading. I think we'll get into kids later on, but I think it's unbelievably important that the kids in this country learn how to read and read well.
One of your most popular series features the psychologist, Alex Cross.
Yeah.
What are his strengths and vulnerabilities from your perspective?
Alex has no vulnerabilities.
Not vulnerable?
I don't write realism, and I think that's one thing that's, every once in a while somebody will say, oh, well, this isn't very realistic. And I always think of somebody looking at a Picasso and going, this isn't very realistic. I don't write realism, and I think anybody, you know, who's using common sense would look at my books and go, it's not realism. There are touches of realism in it. Washington is described in a realistic way in the Alex Cross novels, but Alex is larger than life, and I wanted to write about an African American who was larger than life, who was heroic. I wanted, when I started the series, Hollywood was creating, there were an awful lot of African Americans with the boom boxes and the whole thing, and my experience is that a lot of people don't act that way. There are a lot of really terrific African Americans in this country trying their best to move forward. And with Alex, he's the opposite of that stereotype. He's very family oriented. He's taking care of his kids. His wife is gone. His grandmother lives with him, who's ageless. She's probably in her 90s, Nana Mama. He got a PhD from Johns Hopkins, and he's just not that stereotype that we used to see a lot pre Barack Obama, pre a lot of things. But.
Well, your readers are really attached to Alex. They feel like they know him. Does that make some decisions harder for you when you're thinking about the ongoing narrative of the series?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been threatened. Nothing can happen to Nana Mama. She has to live to be 150, and the cat, nothing can happen to the cat. But one of the tricks is that writer John D. McDonald wrote a lot of famous mystery novels, and his character was Travis McGee, and he, even though the books were a year apart or so, it might be the next week in Travis McGee's life. So I might write 10 books, but it might all just age Alex a year. So that's one little trick too. Otherwise, your hero winds up being as old as you are.
Well, and Alex has a new book coming out in just a few weeks, and it's Merry Christmas, Alex Cross. And I have a feeling the holidays are going to be tricky for him.
Yeah, this is it's a bad Christmas for Alex. It just starts with one of those sort of horrible family tragedies or possible family tragedies, and when he solves that, he gets thrown into something else, which is even worse. And one of the things and the continuing themes in the Cross books, which a lot of us deal with it in a different way, but it's that when work is just overwhelming us and we have no time for family, and that's what Alex goes through, and using Christmas as a time when he wants to be with his family wants him around, but he can't be because his job demands that he not be there. So I think we can all identify, or a lot of us can identify with that.
Well, sure, and I'm very attracted to Alex, but I also feel a special affection for the strong women characters you portray in the Women's Murder Club. Tell us a little bit about how those women complement each other.
Well, the Women's Murder Club, it just seemed to me that, men tend to not be as collaborative as some women are. So the idea of 4 women, a detective, a news reporter, assistant district attorney, and a coroner getting together, and pretty believable that they could become friends. I don't know about the reporter; that could be a little bit of a stretch, but and that they would then solve mysteries together. I thought that was one, just a notion of women being collaborative like that. I thought was kind of cool and different. And most of the mysteries, the series, are either about a lone wolf male or a lone wolf female. And they go home and they smoke cigarettes and have a few drinks and whatever, and that's that kind of the cliche about the genre. In this case, it's 4 women, and they get together occasionally to try to solve mysteries, try to solve a murder or a big case in San Francisco. And I thought that was very fresh in the genre of mysteries.
Were you intimidated at all about writing about women?
No, I grew up in a house full of women: mother, grandmother, 3 sisters, 2 female cats, and the purr and the whatever is still in my head. So I'm very comfortable writing about women. Maximum Ride, which is one of my kids' series, is about a girl. I wouldn't be as comfortable writing a Tom Clancy novel, that kind of book. I don't really know how generals think. I have trouble getting into that headset, but I think I'm pretty in touch with women, and I like women. I like to talk to women. I don't like conversations where it's all about sports. I like sports, but I don't want to talk about sports and money all day long. And with women, it's kind of all over the lot, and I like that. I like that the conversation can go anywhere.
If you got in really, really serious trouble, which person would you call first, Alex Cross or Lindsay Boxer?
Probably called private. my group. That's another series I have, because with private, if I'm having a problem, or Tiger Woods is having a problem, or God knows who is having a problem, if you bring in private, which is the best investigation service in the world, and is one of my book series, if you bring the police in at the end of their investigation, you get a file about this big, and it's all over the newspapers. If you bring in private at the end of the investigation, they give you one piece of paper, and it says for services rendered. And if you can afford it, I think that's how you want your problem solved. Between Lindsay and Alex, it would just depend on whether I was in San Francisco or Washington.
That's a good answer.
They're both good.
You mentioned the Maximum Ride Adventures, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the latest book and the last book in the series is Nevermore. We have the Rest in Peace sticker on this. I mean, what made you decide to bring this to a close?
It just felt that I had written as much as I needed to about Max and her group, and I didn't want to be repetitive. I didn't. This is the 7th or 8th book, and that seemed like enough. With Maximum Ride, what it is, it's a bunch of kids who were brought up in an unlawful laboratory, and they actually were given wings, but these wings, they're retractable, so they could be sitting here, but then out go the wings, and it's a great fantasy for, and not just young adults, but also a lot of adults like reading about this group, because obviously they're, as charming as they are, they're also freaks in nature. But what really got me into writing about Max and this group is just this idea of being able to fly, and being able to write about flying, and being able to read about flying, and what's it like, and oh my God, and that's a wonderful thing. I mean, I wouldn't really want to have wings, because I couldn't handle being different as well as Max and the other kids handle it. But the idea of flying would be just a stunning thing. I mean,
Oh, of course.
Yeah. We have a movie which hopefully will get done in the near future. Universal. You can call Universal and tell them to get going on the movie.
Are you going to miss these kids?
Yeah, I'll miss Max in particular, and Fang, who's sort of her alter ego, male. The name Maximum Ride, that's the name of the series.
Sure.
And she was brought up, as I said, in a lab, and her name was Maximum, which was a little more scientific, and she shortened it to Max, but she didn't have a last name, and so she picked her own last name, and her name is actually, and she picked Ride because of Sally Ride, which appealed to her. So her name is Maximum Ride, but people think it's about Maximum Ride like a trip, but it's really her name.
Yeah. One series ends, a new series begins. Tell us about this new teen mystery series.
Well, I had never written a mystery series for young adults and people that like. There are series that cross over from young adult to adults, like the Twilight series does. Harry Potter did to some extent. Hunger Games does. And Confessions of a, well, the Confession series is what it'll be. The first one is Confessions of a Murder Suspect. And it's about some kids in New York, brothers and sisters, and their parents are killed in the first chapter, and they're the only suspects. And in particular, Tandy, who's the girl in the group, she's the chief suspect for the police, and she's a very nice-looking girl and whatever. And one of they have pictures of her, and does this girl look like a murderer to you? So that whole idea of, and the series is from her point of view. And we don't really know through the book whether she actually is guilty or not. So it's kind of a juicy mystery. It introduces us to this family who are really fascinating. And it's my first mystery series for young adults. And so far, we had a lot of teenagers who read it, and they love it. So it's a nice transition from Maximum Ride. Yeah. Or a nice beginning if your kids. And one of the things about people that are watching and this relates to the YA books, and then I have middle school books as well. I do a lot with kids. I ran an article, or actually it ran at CNN.com, and it was called how to get our kids reading. We can get our kids reading. The usual article there usually gets 800 or so recommends. This article got over 80,000 recommends, which means that people read it and said, you know, boy, that's helpful, that's useful. And one of the things about getting kids reading is, as individuals, we can't solve the healthcare crisis. We can't solve a lot of the big, not as individuals. I mean, we can maybe vote for the right people, whoever they might be. But in terms of getting our kids reading, we can do that. We can do that, and we must do it. That is our job. It isn't the school's job to go out and find books for our kids. That is not the school's job. That's our job. Our job. And we need, my son Jack was 8. He's a very bright boy, but he wasn't a big reader. And what my wife Sue and I did is, that summer we said, you're going to read every day. And he said, do I have to? We said, yeah, you have to. You know, if you're gonna, that's the way we roll in our house. We're going to read. You don't have to mow the lawn, but you do have to read. And, 40 minutes, an hour, whatever it is. And some are really, most kids have 40 minutes or an hour. But I said, we're going to go out and find some really cool books for you. So that's the good news. And we went out and got a Percy Jackson book and The Wanderers, which is a book about or The Warriors book about cats, and Wrinkle in Time, and one of my Maximum Ride books. And we got about 10 or 12 books. By the end of the summer, Jack had read 10 books. About 8 of them he loved. He never loved a book before. And by the end of the summer, his reading skills had gone through the roof. So he went from being a bright kid who wasn't much of a reader to a kid. He just took the SSATs, which they take for prep schools, and he got 800 in reading.
Excellent.
So he went from not being a big reader to being a great reader. And I believe that in most cases, I don't care who you are, people will come up to me all the time and go, I can't get my kid reading. And I'm going, do you get him to the dinner table? Yeah. Well, then you can get him reading. I mean, that has to be the deal in the house. And then you have to go out and find books that they're going to like. And if it starts with comic books, fine. Whatever it is, anything that they'll read, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, fine. But they just have to get that habit. And I'll go to schools and I'll say, well, who likes soccer? Yeah, we all like soccer. Were you better now or 4 years ago? We're better now. How come? Well, we play a lot. Okay, same with reading. The more you do it, the better you get at it. But you can really read fun books. It's not important in early on that kids read Shakespeare. They'll get there, but they won't get there unless they become pretty good readers.
You're also known for your philanthropy. For years, you had the Page Turner Awards and distributed money that way to promote literacy. You've redirected your giving a little bit, and I thought you might talk about that.
Well, I mean, what we always try to do, or what I try to do, is to make the money work as hard as it can, to make it as efficient. And one of the things I'm doing now is I have scholarships in education, over 100 at 10 universities around the country. Vanderbilt, where I went to graduate school, in Manhattan, and Alabama, and Michigan State. Now maybe we'll talk to Oklahoma State now. In each of these schools, all we require is that the kids are in education, that the school feels terrific about their potential to go out there and be great teachers. And at the end of the year, we just ask that they write a little essay about what they would do, either right in that community, so Stillwater, or the state, or the county, whatever, what they've learned that they could see being implemented that would really move the education along, deal with some of the problems, et cetera. So take it out of the school and begin to think about what happens out in the world if you take some of those ideas out there, because we need to make some changes, obviously, in education in the country. And it'd be nice if we got some agreement so that, obviously a lot of it should happen locally, but maybe nationally we can figure out a few things too. And I don't happen to believe that, I don't think it's, I think testing is fine, and I think, I think teachers have to be responsible in some way for what's going on with their kids. So that's tricky too, because it's really apples and oranges depending on where you're teaching. But I don't think it's as important that the kids have read 5 books that the state says, well, these are the 5 books. That's what I think is important, especially at the middle school age, is reading comprehension. That the testing really gets at, can these kids read something and kind of understand it, really understand it? And if they can, then there's hope. Then they can, they can do well in high school conceivably, and they'll read Shakespeare, and they'll read Dickens, and they'll read, a lot of the things that will illuminate life for them a little better, show how authors are capable of, kind of wrestling with the world in words,
What's made this such a passion for you?
A part of it is I'm a real pragmatist, and part of it is that we can actually do something. I don't like banging your head against a wall. I don't like sitting there and complaining about stuff. I'm a pragmatist, and I'm a doer. Do it. Go write the books, man. Get them done. Don't complain about it. Get your kid reading. Don't complain about it. Just get it done. And this is something I felt that could get done. Maybe the best series of all is a middle school series. 2 books, one called Middle School, The Worst Years of My Life, and it's comedic. And there's a lot of illustrations in there, and it's very funny, but it's also a very cool story. It's a moving story about how difficult it can be for some kids in school. And some of the critics would say, and they like the book a lot, but they would say, well, this is great for kids that are having trouble in school. But I think it's even better and more important for kids who aren't having trouble in school, so that they can understand what it's like for some kids who are having trouble, or don't fit in, or and the second book is Middle School, Get Me Out of Here, and it's the same kid, and he's continuing to have trouble. And then this December, I have another middle school book, and it's called I Funny. And what it's really about is dealing with a tragedy, really, with comedy, and how that can be such an important tool in terms of dealing with things that don't go the way we hope they would do. And this kid in I Funny, he wants to be, even at 12 or 13, he wants to be a stand-up comedian. So he's learned every joke in the history of mankind. He knows every comedian. He knows Lucille Ball. He just knows anybody who's been funny, and he knows kind of what makes their comedy work, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very funny book, but it's also a book that kids can read, and I don't want to preach to kids, but they can take a lesson out of it.
You've also been very successful with your standalone titles. We don't have a lot of time, but give us your quick take on Zoo.
Quick take.
It's hard to. I mean, this is a huge book here.
It's a parable for kind of a what's going on in the world, where things seem to be going in crazy directions right now, and what happens in Zoo, and I think it's a very cool book to read, because it's one of those books you read it and you go, I've never read anything like this before. Which is unusual. You don't come up with that. That doesn't happen, to me at least, very much these days. And what's happening is animals are attacking humans around the world, in cities, out in the prairie, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody can quite figure it out. And one scientist begins to get an idea that he's figured out what's going on.
Yeah. And then NYPD Red.
That's coming out in the fall, and that's about, what's happening in a lot of major cities now is they really have specialized groups, because in the precincts they really can't deal. That's what major crimes is all about. That means it's a big, big crime that they couldn't deal with in the local precinct. And in NYPD Red, unlike NYPD Blue, which was sort of dealing with the whole city, NYPD Red, they're dealing with bad things that happen to the rich and famous. So the stories are kind of interesting.
Many of your books are written with co-authors. How hard is it to share a vision and a royalty check with another writer?
I don't share royalties. So that's easy.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people don't understand how common that, the TV business, most scripts are written by a couple of writers, 60-page scripts. Advertising, it's all teams. A lot of movies, it's teams that write a lot of the movies. If you start going through a lot of the through Europe and looking at museums and whatever, you'll find a lot of cathedrals, even paintings that were several different. Da Vinci used to be part of a team at one point. You'll see work of his in some of the cathedrals and whatever, in Florence, etc. So it's not really that. It's not as odd as people think it is. And what it allows me to do is, one, tell lots. I have a lot of stories. I have this thick at home, a file on, and just with story after story after story, and I could never tell them if I just had to, write every single word in every book.
If you could go back in history and co-write a book with one of the great authors, who would it be?
Well, I wouldn't want to co-write, but I'd like to sort of hang around with James Joyce and maybe read his pages every night.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. We just have a short period left here, and I want to ask you, what's the most important thing we don't know about you? There's been a lot of profile work done on you.
Nice guy, funny guy, down to earth. I'm not, I am the best-selling author in the world. I don't find that impressive. It just kind of happened, and I think, I think it's kind of important for people to just be comfortable in their own skins, to try to make sure that core, that they believe in that core person. And it's not about your attributes, not about your hair or the shoes you wear, and it's not about the fact that you sell a lot of books. It's about how you act as a human being. So I think that's what drives me more than anything else.
That's well said. Thank you so much for being here,
Oh, you're
James.
welcome.
And thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.